Yeah, sounds good from here.
Cool.
We're just waiting for Tyler here, and then I believe we'll be ready to go. Okay. Let's do a mic check. Devin, Tyler, your mic's working okay?
Grass tastes bad.
Please don't eat grass.
And how about now?
I hear
Hey,
you.
Hey, God. These computers, man.
All right. Are we all ready to start our third episode of Tavern Talks?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, for those who are just tuning in for the first time, who might have not been here for our previous ones, these Tavern Talks are basically a live Q&A. We have a forum here in the Discord server that we open up for our community to post questions that they would like the dev team to answer, and just cover some of the development and any questions that you might have. And then so we'll go through those that were posted in that forum, and then we'll also take some questions from the chat here in the stage later on. And yeah, so Tyler, if you just want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Devin afterwards.
Hello, I'm Tyler, aka Droost. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Team 21.
well, hello. I'm Devin. I'm trying to figure out how to turn my camera on, but I don't think I've got permissions for it.
Yeah, it's actually it's a whole thing. I just
Is it?
learned that. Yeah.
Well, I'm Devin. I'm our technical artist. I make sure that the game runs good and looks good on all the platforms. And I kind of hang out in here a lot and talk to everybody. So you probably have seen me.
The game Devin himself.
The game Devin.
And I'm Cosmos. I'm the community manager for Team 21. So you also see me hanging out here in Discord and across our socials and things like that. Devin, give me 1 second. I'm just checking your perms here, see if I can
Cool.
fix that for you. All right, try now. You should be good.
Oh, hey, cool. There's a button here.
Bouton.
I'm alive. Haha.
Hey.
Hey, Devin.
Hello.
All right.
My dogs are going to be running around in the
And a
background.
dog.
Please try to ignore them.
So, we're just going to dive right into it. Some general questions are posted in the forums category on our Discord the past day or so. The first one was posted by, and apologies if I pronounce your usernames wrong. I'll try really hard, but Dementhal is asking, do you plan on progressively adding horizontal content or keep the EA as a small vertical slice, only adding new features?
That's an awesome question. So when we first rolled out the early access, we wanted to we had lots of plans in the roadmap. This is one of the reasons the roadmap hasn't come out yet, is because we've had to shift stuff around because we're listening to people say, don't do what other games have done and just flood it with new content. We have new content in the works, level cap increases, new areas, but a lot of people are being very loud about fixing the stuff that the users are caring about being broken before we just pile on more content. And that's kind of where we're at right now in our brain. Like, let's work on the bugs that people are struggling with. Let's work on the features that we want for the core mechanics and the stuff that we're still tweaking before we kind of go heavy into the content. But yes, there is new stuff coming. The roadmap, we'll talk a bit more about that when we're finished.
Sweet. All right. So our next question is posted by Vasilia, and they're asking, when will Kickstarter backers expect to see the rewards in game?
Another good question. So we are very cognizant of people that back the game and have lots of different rewards that they had. We started with the very beginning. Some people saying like nothing is being done for Kickstarter people. We have to start small, and we are a small studio or a tiny team. We're trying to get all this stuff done by launch, so it's not necessarily tied to the early access. But we at least wanted to get people, everybody that had a free key to be able to get into the game, should have their free copy of the game. That free download counts as early access as well. So we want to at least get people into the Discord and get people that paid for a free copy that get their free copy. So we are ticking down the list. It is something that is important to us, and we'll get there through the process of getting to launch.
All right. And our next question is posted by Music Man, and they are asking, are there any plans to allow early access for PSVR 2 players?
Yes.
As soon as we can, yes. Yeah.
We've got our dev kits.
Yes.
We're working on it.
Yeah, we are actively working on our PSVR right now as we speak.
Awesome. All right. And then our next one posted by Sologio. I'm trying. I'm sorry about your username. They're asking, would Team 21 consider putting a developer bounty board with bugs that developers can help fix for a small reward?
I'm not sure how something like that would work. It's an interesting idea. I could hear more about it if somebody wants to write something up.
I think the elaborated version on it in the actual post had said something along the lines of, when a bug gets found, we post a bounty up for it, and then any developer can go work on it and fix the bug. And then once it's approved and fixed and everything, it gets merged in and put into the game. But I think there's a handful of problems with that. Firstly, that would require us making our code base more available to the public. And that makes it doesn't quite work for an MMO. Because if we make our code base available to everybody, suddenly I can just go into the game and get myself gold. I can already do that. I'm a developer, but we don't want everybody else to be able to do that.
And yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of people say like, it can't be that much code. There's not that much stuff going in there, but there's over 500,000 lines of code in here that would beg to differ, and a ton of that was proprietary.
Yeah, and part of protecting our game is that a lot of things are server side, and
Yes.
People can hack our client, sure, but they can't hack the server anywhere near as easily. So we don't want to make that available. The other problem that can create is, yes, there would be an approval process, but our team is so small that we wouldn't really have anybody available to just go test those kinds of things and approve them and then put them into the game properly. On top of finding ways to make the code accessible to people that can actually come fix it. That's kind of like how Bone Labs has an entire SDK for Unity for creating mods for their games. We would have to find some way to do something like that gives people the ability to come in and help make changes or fixes, but not completely give them the ability to hack our game.
Well said. It's an interesting idea, though. I mean, I love the enthusiasm of community involvement to that level. That's pretty cool to hear that people want to do that.
Yeah, and even now the community has been just absolutely fantastic as far as finding those bugs and sending us that report. And if anybody in here isn't aware already, we do have a channel in here that will direct you to that forum. So if you run across something funky in game, feel free to report it. Anytime that you guys submit screenshots or videos of something weird that you find, send that in with your report. It's a huge help for our team, and we try to address those as quickly as possible. So thank you guys.
It might be a good counter to maybe have a bug bounty board. Like we've got, our team is small. I keep saying it. Testing certain things takes a lot of time. Like our most recent patch had some problems that broke some quests. And to go test some of those quests that are deep into the game, we have to go create fresh characters and play all the way up until that quest to make sure that nothing along the way is broken, and then that quest itself isn't broken. So we have to go retest every single quest and replay through the entire game every time we want to go make sure that those things have been fixed. So it could be nice to have a bounty board for players to go bug test and confirm that something is fixed. That might help us expand our testing team a little bit in an organic way that keeps people engaged and lets the community help.
Awesome.
That's kind of why we have that open bug board too. Like the whole concept of having our, go report a bug here, like that gets looked at every single day, and we don't care that there's duplicates. But the nice thing about that community involvement too is we kind of get like our favorite bugs and stuff that we just never found. And stuff as good as the frying pan from betas, but we'd like lots of good bugs that come in there and encourage people to keep using it for feedback. Even if it's like little stuff, like I would prefer, like there's categories for feedback in there too. Like if there's ways that something works that you think it should work differently, or a way you would propose to fix a bug, that's a great thing to put in there. Like if you come from a development background and you have ideas about something, feel free to elaborate in those bugs because people do read them.
Yeah, and even also in the Discord as well, we have that feedback forum just for, those ideas, suggestions, things that you guys don't like, do like, and we go through them. I read them on a daily basis. I take notes, I add them into a Google Doc, and I'm always bugging the team about, hey, they don't like this, they like this isn't working, this is working. So we're definitely reading those things that you guys submit to us. So seriously, thank you guys. Let me see here. So from those questions, we move more into some gameplay stuff, notably combat questions here. So our first question from Demethyl as well is asking, do you plan on making bow wielding more realistic, like having to fetch each arrow in a quiver, knock it, pull the string, and then release?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into super specifics, but there is a bow rework coming to make archery a little bit more interactive and work differently based on feedback. That's what EA is for. So that is going through the design phase right now. That's pretty much almost signed off. We've got some cool stuff that we want to do. I don't have a timeline for it right now. It's like because I think fixing combat from a melee perspective is probably like the number one thing that we're paying attention to right now on the dev team, aside from the PSVR stuff. And because we know that that's currently riding the struggle bus pretty hard. And so we're fixing that first, and then we're going to look at other ways to make ranged combat more interesting as well.
All right. So since you mentioned Melee, Tangent wrote a couple of questions about Melee specifically. They're asking, describe your complete vision of Melee. And there's a couple of things here. So will it have more of a sense of physical interaction, for example, knockback, push pulling, weapon collisions, things like resistance, getting stuck, slowly cutting through, bounce back recoil? So we'll start there, and there's a few other questions to that he has.
The all-encompassing physics side of VR, which you can put that stuff in there. That is really interesting to us. Also, a lot of physics stuff works great in certain types of games and not so much in others. Finding a balance for how, because we have spent quite a bit of time talking about this over the last year and a half, especially looking at how we want to do stuff and grow it out. But there are some cases where deep physics-based interaction, and I'm thinking in my mind like Blade and Sorcery, that kind of that level of physical combat, may not lend itself particularly well to the environment of playing an MMO. So we're playing with ideas of how to do that, so you don't just like grab a monster and immobilize it by grabbing onto its neck while a bunch of other people in your party come and cheese everything out. I mean, there's stuff when it's you versus the world. A lot of that stuff works really well when you're with your friends and you're trying to do something and playing in a large open world. Not so much. Never mind the network and just the code side of trying to deal with that many players, trying to send that many physics calls that many times to a cell phone that's strapped to your face on mobile. These are all design considerations that have to be taken into account. long story short, we are deeply interested in making the combat system feel better, and we think that physics, especially like if you look at the evolution of combat since like the early days of 2015 2016 in VR and to what's being demoed now, it's really maturing a lot, and there's those maturations are becoming more optimized. They're being coded differently, and that's all stuff that we're looking at to try and see how that fits into our box.
Okay, and I don't know if it's something that you can talk about at this time, but in their question as well, they'd mentioned things like two-handed weapons, um, heavy two-handed weapons like claymores, katanas, and things like that. Is that something that we can expect to see?
There's something you're going to see.
Can you repeat
I
that because your
can.
mic cut
Oh,
out a little
your
bit?
mic totally died.
Oh wow, am I okay now?
You're good
Yeah,
now.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, no, two-handed weapons are definitely something people are going to see. That is definitely planned out, thought about, and happening.
Yeah. And in regards to weight, that goes right back to the physics stuff. It could be an interesting way to explore letting players have physicality to their local weapons and weight so that they feel nicer to wield themselves without completely going crazy on the network side of having all of the enemies be completely physics interactable like something in Blade and Sorcery or Boneworks, Bone Lab. Yeah, we're deeply invested in it. We know how to do a lot of these things, a lot of these techniques that have been done in a lot of these single player games. We've got the expertise. The hard part is the network side. So we're testing and working on these things all the time, revisiting and trying to see how we can rework them and make them fit in a game of our scale.
In knowing that half our market is mobile anyway, that's like a big piece of it. We only have so much bandwidth to deal with. Now, nice thing about that is mobile hardware is getting better and better and better. For those people on the Quest 3, I already know, that's it's a pretty amazing device.
The hardware is fantastic, even for our game specifically. Like, if we turn off some of the optimizations that we did for Quest 2, the game wants to run at 90 hertz with our current Quest 2 version just running on the Quest 3. That gives us a lot of extra headroom to do nice things on the headset.
Exactly.
Awesome. And Envy also posted a similar question regarding melee combat. They asked, does Team 21 have plans to revisit the current functionality of melee combat? As of right now, it still feels a little bit clunky, which I know you guys mentioned, but maybe that you can talk a little bit more about that.
I think that it's disingenuous to say that it feels a little bit clunky. I think it feels a lot of bit clunky, personally, and most of us feel that way. So, yes, that. I'll say it again. Just that is the number one thing we're working on right now. We had a meeting about it earlier today. So
Yeah,
it's
and
the
not to
highest
call
priority we have.
not to call a bad system, a broken, buggy system, anything other than that. But there's also the fact that we haven't done a very good job explaining to people how to use it. I'm still seeing live streamers and YouTubers who are actively playing melee builds, fighting Balramos, just wiggling their hand. And we haven't explained to anybody that we have a combo system and that the arc of your swing and the speed of your swing and the length of your swing all matter to make sure that you're actually doing damage. Because if you just sit there and wiggle it, you can get it to trigger something, but nowhere near as confidently and smoothly as if you're just 1, 2, 3, doing it with a little bit of tempo and
waiting for that sword to go off cooldown.
Yeah,
which a lot of people don't like the cooldown too. So we're looking at
and I
different
honestly
ways
think
for how it's going to work.
I honestly think that melee, if you understand it, and I'm biased because I know how it works because I'm in the code. If you understand it, I think it might be one of the strongest things in the game still. The easiest way to kill enemies quickly because everybody else still has their cooldowns and their extra steps. Even though melee does have a cooldown, it doesn't require aim. It doesn't require knowing the spells and things. It does. You do need to know the combos so you can cast skills properly.
And I think that goes back to doing a better job explaining people like how to do the combos. And that's not to be said, like above all of this is just a better rework of the hit detection system itself and the melee combat system itself. And we're that's what we're working on right now. And then that, along with better explanations about the combos, so they actually fire off when people mean to, and don't get frustrated and say that this isn't working. Which we're listening. We gotta do better on that. So we're fixing it.
And so we talked a little bit about bows and melee combat. So our next question was submitted by Lexi, and they are asking, are there still plans for hand gesture casting? I haven't heard anything about hand gesture casting since alpha. Was wondering if you still see a place for it in the game.
We do. We talk about that too, making the magic system be a hybrid mix of how to do maybe some smaller spells that don't cost as much mana, or there in like in an emergency case. We're talking about ideas about bringing back the whole hand gesture. We actually did that first. We were the first people to do that in pre-alpha, to have that type of a casting system in this gameplay style. Then we took it away, and we have regrets about that. So it's something that we talk about a lot, and there is room for it to come back. It's still part of our design conversations, and has not been forgotten about. We just have to find the right spot for it.
All right. So from there, moving on to some more general game questions about gameplay and the environment and things like that. Jokero is asking, will there be points to invest at level up? Classic points such as like stamina, health, dexterity, mana, armor. Let's see what else they wrote here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the character advancement, a la, pen and paper RPGs. Those systems are displayed like in the character sheet in your wardrobe and stuff. Those are things that we think are an important piece of character customization that should come back now that we've opened up the class back to the classless system. They were kind of locked down during the non free forge version, but we do think that those should come back and be things that you can do to invest in some of those points. I think it's an important part of character advancement.
We're also kind of adjusting how gear affects your stats on those regards, because without the free forge, it was kind of just locked in. Mages only wear robes, and those robes only boost like intelligence. And now that you can make hybrid builds, if I want to make a paladin that's got a sword and a staff, suddenly I'm putting on a hood, some chainmail, and some cloth boots to kind of boost all of those different stats. And expanding on that is kind of the goal.
All right. Our next question was submitted by Sax, and they are asking, will quests be rewarded so that enough information is provided for players to complete them without needing the Wadar? And they also go on to mention, at the moment, the Wadar is an essential element, and it kills all sense of fun exploration in doing quests without it.
Actually, an interesting piece of feedback. There is a subset of dialogue that has been written for every quest. It's like a summary of what you're supposed to be doing that goes in the quest log itself. We're working on making sure that it displays correctly and in the right spot, so the players that would rather go read their quest log to go, well, what was I doing again, and go look at it, have the information available, that kind of a summary of what I'm looking for, where I should be looking for it, and who's asked me to look for it. That is already written down. It's already that dialogue exists. We're just refining it and trying to push that back out to be in a more discoverable space. So it's a very good call out, Sax, that it needs to be there.
I think there's also a little bit of room to expand. Why is everything shaking?
Are you okay?
My dog is under my desk. I don't have an earthquake. My dog is under my desk. My German Shepherd is scratching himself, but also bumping the table. Sorry about that. I think this also leaves a little bit of room for adding some side quests kind of dynamically that you can discover in the world. I know we've got a lot of like kind of off the beaten path little like logging camps or bear caves or wolf dens that kind of aren't being used just yet in that regard, and that's where we want to reward the exploration, because we know there's a lot of people who care about dynamically finding those things, whereas the main quest, it's kind of like, okay, this is the main progression and you have to be able to quickly and easily go find those things.
All right.
We are rewriting quests as well in the general dialogue right now. One of the things we had in a narrative team meeting earlier this week was rewording quests overall to kind of flow better into each other, to tell the story that we're trying to tie together, actually be more cohesive and followable, and just give more details in dialogue about the quest itself. It was an interesting, just not to go off on a tangent, like what we learned during Alpha 1 and Alpha 2 was just how much people don't like to read and didn't want to read the quests, and they just kind of wanted to click through stuff. And that's where I feel like maybe the pendulum swung too far in the other direction, where it was like, for those players that are being loud and they don't want to read, fine, go ahead, use your weight arm, move from objective to objective really fast and get things done. But I feel like, just kind of going back to Sax's point, like that pendulum needs to come back this direction a little bit. I'm not the narrative person. I am the business guy. We have a narrative team with a chief narrative person over there, but they're actively listening to feedback, and that's where their mindset is right now as well.
I also saw somebody mention in our live chat voice actors. We are actively working on voicing a good portion of our NPCs. I don't know what it entails just yet, because it was as we were coming out of beta and into EA, we were like, oh, why aren't we voice acting our characters? And then we started working on it, and I don't know exactly where it's gone, but we have made a lot of progress and recorded a lot of voice lines, at least for, I know we've got the Astra on the tutorial islands all voiced. You might recognize who that is. And then we've also been kind of slowly building on that progressionally, having more and more NPCs starting from that tutorial area get voiced. So it is something we're actively working on.
I mean, we might start with just the story people. Right now, I know the voice work that has been done from the files that I've listened to and seen, it's kind of, they're doing them in order, like of appearance. But yes, we're starting that whole process of getting voice files in the game for people that would just
we've got our entire content streaming system already supports having as many voiceovers as we want to dynamically work into the game and keep performant without bogging down. The file size will get bigger, but that's about it.
Awesome. All right. Our next question was posted by Sir Meows a lot. And they're asking, to make the world feel more alive, we need more living things. When can we expect moving villagers and towns on roads to make eye contact and greet players? And things like doing chores or jobs following the day and night cycle.
Don't have a date, but that is something we're also looking at. Starting actually a little bit smaller. The current conversations around that are NPCs that just travel between towns, merchants that travel between towns. So you'll see people not just in hub cities or out at fixed positions.
Yeah, and we did have a system for NPCs dynamically looking at you as you approach them. We turned it off once we discovered a bug in it that was going to take a little bit more effort than some of the other really big important things that needed fixing first. So that can very easily come back once we dedicate time to it.
Okay. Our next question was posted by Soulraiser, and they are asking, will you be adding lighting effects for immersion when running through dungeons and caves? So example of that is making the caves and dungeons darker and using torches and things like that.
Let me hit that one, because that is something we've wanted to do for a while. There are a lot of limitations on the Quest 2, and a lot of those limitations have been lifted for the Quest 3, and now we've got to figure out performant ways to bring the functionality of real-time lighting and shadows to the Quest 2 without breaking things. Because as soon as you turn an extra light on, the Quest 2 dies. It has a bad time. There are games that do have dynamic lighting and shadows, but they're not an MMO. A lot of them have things baked down and things like that, or are faking it in different ways. And that's things that we are exploring. I think as the technology continues to improve, it'll be something that'll become a lot more central to how things function. As far as dungeon goes, it's a little bit more difficult to get the real actual dynamic lighting in there that's brightening things up and casting really cool shadows. As for like out in the world though, we do have lanterns and fires and different things like that that kind of fake it a little bit, and it doesn't, you don't get the real actual light that's casting shadows, but it's still faked in a way that it looks like the area is a little bit brighter and things like that. It's tech that we're still exploring and working on because it's complicated to do in an open world game that also has to meet a whole bunch of performance requirements for an MMO.
But back to that maturing hardware, like you said.
Yeah, the Quest 3 is awesome. That's
and it's like, like my first device was like somewhere back there. It was my WMR, and then it was my Quest 1, and then my Quest 2, and it's like we didn't even want to drop support for the Quest 1, but having a game engine that no longer has it as a valid build target kind of forced our hand on that.
Yeah, the moment we start talking about visual improvements and some of the making the environment feel more alive with lighting, suddenly it's like, well, I guess we have to start figuring out what the timeline is for Meta phasing out support for the Quest 2, because it will happen, and it might happen a lot quicker than it did for the Quest 1 and 2 because of the drastic change in hardware capabilities. Suddenly we're able to have much higher resolution textures and real-time lighting and actual foliage that won't crash the game in certain situations, and so everybody's using the technology and extra headroom differently, and with it is going to very quickly become a problem of developers that can make something that looks awesome on the Quest 3 but looks like a Nintendo game from 20 years ago on the Quest 2. So it'll be interesting, and I think they might phase it out a little faster this time around, just because of the vast difference in the hardware.
Hopefully not super fast though.
Yeah, we don't want to make it inaccessible for players. We don't want people to be like, we have to shell out an extra $500 to go keep playing the games that we've already bought. That sucks.
That's why we don't phase out hardware. We
don't phase it out.
They hardware when the manufacturer tells us to.
Yep. Until then, we will keep doing everything we can to keep all of the features the same between all the platforms. I think one of the other things we're looking at, because we were just talking about lighting, is our dynamic weather system.
Mm-hmm.
That's all been made and ready to go, and then we've got a little bit further to go to make sure it's all working on the server side of things, and so that's something that'll also come back.
Excited for that.
Man, the snow building up was pretty cool.
That is really cool. I love that. Yeah. Let's see. So our next question, this was posted by Revo, and they're asking, with VR gaming being held a very small subset of the gaming community, why did the team go in the direction of completely isolated factions, breaking the VR community up into smaller groups? Will we see even more separation further as the game develops?
Yeah, that's a great question. We went with factions because we're building towards, we think that PvP has a pretty good place in it, and it made sense for us to start in kind of the story that's written about Iysia. It does center around two opposing factions, an encroaching visiting faction versus a native faction. So we will keep that. The intent is not to split the player base. The intent is just to have that dynamic exist. Because it's kind of part of the bag that we started with, 3 years ago, and pushing towards that story. So yeah, that's why the factions are there.
Yeah, we do have some plans for areas that are like mixing them, and that will be where the PvP starts to take a little bit more effect, and
yes,
and the standard things that you're used to in like WoW, where if an orc goes into Stormwind, that they're not going to have a good time, type of thing. I mean, it's changed recently, but classic WoW, like if you walked up to an opposing faction, you were going to get hit. So that's kind of the way we're trying to go with things. Is that?
Yeah, we actually recently had a conversation about world design for upcoming areas and letting the factions kind of mix more freely, more contested zones, using a WoW term.
There's a lot of potential for the content.
Yeah.
But we do recognize that currently it's split our player base to two different parts of the same map.
There was a second part of that question though about more factions and not in the cards right now. We have more races coming, more playable races, but they belong to one of either faction.
And there, our next question actually kind of bounces off of the previous one here. Cloud is asking, will there be a main city for both factions? And he says, as the title states, I've been wondering if you guys are planning on adding main cities or if it'll just be an exploration-based MMO.
There will be, as the areas expand, you'll get to see more of capital city type stuff, faction holds.
Yeah, at the moment we've got Westgalit and my lord, if I not played the Dom side enough, it's Portis, right? Is the Westgalit equivalent? Yeah,
yep.
And the goal was to kind of have those be a central thing. It's just that we don't have quite yet the content and reason to be in those places as a central thing just yet. Stormwind is a central part of World of Warcraft because it's where you go and you do all your trading. It's where you do all your training. Yeah, and that's kind of the goal for everything, is that once we've got crafting going and players can start trading with each other, that they're going to congregate in these main areas.
Okay, so that is from the forum post in the Discord here. So we can take a few questions from the text chat. One of them that I saw just a couple of minutes ago was posted by Riot. Riot was asking, does Team 21 plan to have drops from bosses be a role-based system like what WoW did?
We kind of honestly, we like the system that we have right now where people get individual loot. But we've gone back and forth on that. It's feedback we're willing to listen to. A bunch of people are like, "Nah, we just want to go back to rolling and distributing for raids and bosses." But right now, we're kind of sticking with the idea that if you're present and there, then you can have individual loot as long as you're tagged onto the monster's threat table.
Okay, and then a little bit earlier ago, I saw Master Dante was asking about professions. They were asking, when is cooking going to be added? Is there anything you can talk about with that?
Cooking got bumped down the list based on user feedback for us fixing things about movement and the combat controller right now. But it is something that is one of the more complete things that is very close to ready to come in. So it will be shortly down the pipe after that.
Okay. And I'm scrolling through these questions here. Give me just a second. There was a good one. I saw it and it scrolled too far up. Hang on. I'm looking. Where did it go? Okay. This one was actually posted from Mike's, sorry. They're asking, how do you plan to avoid the game feeling like a monotonous climb up a never-ending staircase? Presently, players seem to progress from the Yeti Cave to Balramos, which is fine, because there are only 2 dungeons. However, reminiscent of Zenith's issue, where the entire game was essentially akin to navigating a series of compulsory dungeons. How will you ensure the game's progression feels like a linear ascent and more like a customized experience tailored to the player? That was a lot.
I feel like that's a question about world design, and that is something that Xander thinks a lot about, how to get players moving from location to location, like exactly like they were saying, not just being a series of dungeon runs after dungeon runs. A lot of that has to do with narrative and world design working in lockstep together to try and move the story pieces together through these different areas.
Yeah, Xander and I have a lot of conversations about how we can explore expanding kind of the core gameplay loop in different ways. We've talked about the kind of players that like to come in and do dungeons and raids, and that's their whole thing, and how can we cater to those. But we've also had some conversations about different ways that we can cater to the kind of folks who like the stumbling upon a new area that's got some new quests type of thing. I know we've got some folks on the team that play a lot of ESO. One of our developers used to work on their team. or not developers. One of our artists used to work on our team. One of our world designers, and I think ESO has kind of fallen into a really cool way of handling that sort of dynamic, not quite linear way of running into quests. They've got all their different DLCs now that have entire new regions and areas that you can stumble through. I remember a quest that I rolled into a random city after wandering through the woods, and they had me do a spirit journey thing by doing skooma in the woods and fighting spirit animals. And then I come back and do a whole bunch of extra quests that basically made me Batman for that city. And I got a whole suit of armor that was tied to that whole quest line. And it was just this random thing that I stumbled upon. Players who play that game a lot more diligently probably know a lot more about it because I haven't played it in a while. But that's the kind of experience that we want players to have when that's the kind of content they like. We want them to dynamically come into areas and find new fun quest lines that take you on a small tangent somewhere else. And we've got some areas in our current version of the world that very quickly allow us to create things like that. It's things that we've got to continue to flesh out. But we have these kinds of design talks all day, every day. It's something we're passionate about, and we're excited to hear that the community's passionate about it too.
All right. Another question came in from Cosmic, and they are asking, when making major changes or additions to the game, is there a possibility that Team 21 will open up a polling system to ask the community how they feel about certain aspects? Take old school RuneScape, for example. And then they go on to say, ultimately, it's up to the devs, but it would be good for y'all to know how the community feels about things before you implement changes.
Totally. We recognize that some of the opinions in the community are kind of sometimes from the loud minority, and it is difficult to kind of filter that thing out. Like some folks will be like, I don't like this specific thing about the game. Game's bad. I hate it. And they make that their thing to keep saying over and over. And then we go, look at all these players saying this thing, because we just come back every now and then and see somebody complaining about it, but turns out it's the same person. So
right. But the sentiment of that poll has been something we've been talking about internally to get past that. A public poll that's about two different types of ways something could work, when it gets to to a position where we have something to show off, maybe, is something we have talked about, as far as seeing what the majority thinks instead of just like you're saying, loud individuals.
Yeah.
So
it also helps with things like performance testing. I see in the chat we've got some folks that are like, PC VR performance is kind of all over the place, and I take that personally because it's my job to make sure it works well. So then it's like, okay, what's your hardware? What's your specs? What are all your settings set to? Let's create a way for people to submit how things are running on their machines so that I can help get more feedback and tune the settings better. I mean, I'm on a laptop with a mobile 3070, and I run the game on Ultra on my Quest 2 when I'm using AirLink, and I don't have any issues. And so finding out more information is the biggest thing to help solve those problems. Because if everybody else is having a problem that I'm not able to recreate, then I need more help. We need more feedback and more information so that we can solve those problems. I think a poll is a great way to do it.
Yep. Good suggestion.
Yeah. KT is asking in the chat, are there any ideas being talked about in terms of social features?
Social interaction is extremely important in virtual reality. If Xander was here, this topic would get him going for the next hour. So our design department is very into the social aspects that make VR feel like VR. And those features are going to be coming more into the game.
Yeah, honestly, those discussions come up so regularly. It's almost to the point where, like, hey, we're fixing combat, give me a minute.
Yeah. But yes, big old fat yes.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. Some more questions. Shanti is asking, how can the devs tell us exactly what they need tested for us as a player base to assist? versus just, this is broken? What kind of info is needed to assist the devs? That's a great question.
That it. We don't really have a good way to do that because we don't have we started this with the here are patch notes type things as kind of like a go test these things to make sure that you're also, seeing that they're fixed. But there should be some way for us to say, to have a place to say, hey, here's a top issue we're having trouble nailing down a good repro for. And those have happened. I come from my previous life as a software engineer. The repro steps for bugs was probably some of the most inconsistent stuff that you get as feedback. And in order to trace down some of these really funky issues, a general call to arms on reproing for a bug is something we've talked about. Maybe we should publish a list of like kind of going back to that bug bounty thing. Like it's not about the fixing it. It's more about helping us find a consistent repro. So we would like to actually try and find a public forum for a way to do that. We don't know if we want to do it like on the website or do it here in Discord yet, of like our top offending bugs we're having trouble reproducing in the team.
Yeah, and I know there's, alongside that, there's a lot of potential for people to accidentally just report the same bug that's already been reported in our current bug reporting system. Yeah. So finding ways to better flesh that stuff out. The other thing is it's a fun thing to try and figure out how to balance how heavy we want to rely on the community to test these sort of things, because there's kind of the mixed feedback of EA is a buggy mess, but we want a really good, solid game, and we're not going to go buy it if it's not finished, type of thing from new players that aren't part of our community. So there's a balance to be had of, I just bought this game, why am I playtesting it? Sort of questions that come a lot, even though that's the point of EA. So there's a fun balance of how do we handle that without discouraging new players.
Right.
Okay. Scrolling through these here. Pyrio was asking, can opposite faction quests and dungeons can play together currently, or is that planned? And I think that kind of goes back to the factions as well, because I know a lot of players are, mentioning, hey, I'm on, this faction, and my friend is on this faction. Is there any plans to somehow like merge them together?
We've talked about internally is that you are correct that quests are currently faction locked, but there should be ways for opposite factions to do dungeon content of the other faction for still a purpose other than just running it through and getting a random gear drop. Those are conversations we've also had. Is maybe the Empire side has a reason to go kill the Yeti also, and we should try and think about that. It's harder to get to. That's another thing we're talking about with map design and kind of opening it up a little bit. But so I guess the answer is a blend of there will be some cross-faction questing, but don't expect all of it.
Oh, can I call attention to The Walking Dead VR in his saying that he doesn't mind doing the place testing aspect, but let me group. Dungeons are currently having issues with players in parties getting in and crashing. We know that, and we are actively working on that. That is a very top priority. That is definitely not something that should be broken. So we're checking on that. We're working on that. We've got all hands on deck with something like that.
Okay, and I saw a post a little bit higher up from the Pigeon Lord, and they were asking, will player avatars ever get a rework? I don't know if you guys can talk more on that at all.
That's nice. That feeling. Someday, yes, we have what we have for right now. Internally, we kind of have the same conversations and discussions though about not feeling like you're in the right proper proportions for the avatar, and that's something we're cognizant of.
Yeah, we'd love to find ways to make what we currently have work better and feel better. The whole way that our game works is very tied into the avatar system and your player body. It's all designed. The armors are all designed to fit the specific proportions of our characters' bodies, our weapons and everything. And so to go rework those things is a pretty heavy art lift. And so what we want to do is make what we've got work. But we also recognize that if it's not going to work, we should probably find a better way with different assets. But for now, the excuse me, I keep choking on something. For now, the focus is mostly on finding out what we can do to make it work better. Because it's pretty easy to try and work around what we've got, but reworking everything requires remaking most of our armors, all of our races, and things like that, because the proportions are already set. So the best route is to try and fix what we've got, if that makes sense.
Okay. And through this, I've also seen a couple of players mentioning just some of the bugs that we are aware of currently. If you guys, I don't know if you guys would like to talk more about the upcoming hotfix at all here.
This next hotfix, we're working on some of the bugs that were introduced with this last round, and that's been a big topic this whole week. The quest bugs and mostly the quest bugs. But as far as the upcoming content patches, again, we're working mostly on, and it's gonna be a while. It's not like this is gonna be done by the next patch Tuesday, just to throw it out there. But we have a lot of resources, full-time paying attention to the character controller and the combat system. So that's kind of what's on the horizon. That's going to be the next big thing that y'all see. But as far as the stuff that broke recently, yes, there's a hotfix coming. It is also being worked on today. It was being worked on all week, actually. So since Tuesday.
And there were a handful of bugs that might not quite seem all related, but we've nailed down that most of it is tied to the way that the quests were broken. Yeah, players having issues with mobs not respawning or not dropping things or not behaving the way they should are also tied into the way that they function with quests being slightly broken.
And I think that goes back to just the testing in general, because they are tied to quests. It's taking a little bit longer because some of these are far into the quest lines, and that involves us having characters
playing through.
Like, we have tools, obviously, that let us skip hearty chunks of content and set ourselves up to do certain things faster. But there's a lot of related stuff that needs to be checked on this to make sure
this works. We don't get to skip content.
Broken.
All right. And
I saw a little higher up. I don't remember who specifically asked it. Oh, there it is. I'm not gonna try and pronounce that.
Do it. If I have to do it, you have to do it.
Alnian. There's a bunch of E's and A's right next to each other. But they say, I feel like a lot of what's going on with the class stuff is the shape and rigging, and assuming dwarfs are not going to be a thing. Our dwarves are kind of like dwarves in Skyrim. They're called dwarves, but our rock people are our Dwemer race. We've been calling them dwarves internally and to the community, but I don't think we ever made it clear that our rock people are what we were calling dwarves.
Yeah, the Bowden.
The Bowden, yep. And we changed their name because there was a point where we were like, they're not traditional dwarves, so we're going to stop calling them that. We did that for a handful of our races. We were calling them human.
I feel like there's another layer to this question, though, that's not specifically about the word dwarves. It's about maybe having small,
different proportioned characters,
proportioned races. That is something we talked about and we tried in really early builds of stuff, and it did not work very well, especially when trying to mess with each other in PvP. That's something where we would like to look at it again when we have some breathing room for that, to see how we can get a design function that works well in VR for that.
The way that people were taking gnomes in early WoW to get an advantage in PvP, or playing I really wish I played EverQuest more in its heyday, but I think there was a rat race that people were taking that you could play as a really short rat character, and then you play a rogue and backstab really quick and easy because you could jump around and people couldn't click on you fast enough because you were so small.
And all those problems are exacerbated in VR.
Oh yeah. So people having issues hitting the crab because they're so low to the ground.
Yeah. Personally, like, I'm a gamer as well. Like I would love it.
Yeah, totally. The diversity is awesome,
not-
and having vastly different characters from each other is just cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and a question here by Cosmic as well was asking, when will players be able to utilize hip slots to place weapons, potions, etc.?
A new inventory management system that pays attention to what the people who played Alpha 1 and Alpha 2 had, like the hip slots and stuff. There is a rework in progress that's still currently we're solving a couple design issues, but 2 weeks ago we were talking about this and looking at how we can bring some slots back and having them be useful.
Sweet. All right. I keep seeing questions about plushies.
Yeah.
So we are. I am in talks with a manufacturer, who are absolutely fantastic. That for something like that, the processing time takes a couple of months for it to go through design phases and the manufacturing and then shipping. So I wouldn't expect to see something like that for a little bit later in time. But we are in talks in regards to the plushies. So just be on the lookout.
Higher up, Cosmic asked if there was plans to rework the player UI. Also talking about how the backpack is not parented to the player character. That's actually something that we actively talk about on a regular basis.
We had that conversation about flipping it so it is parented.
Yep.
Specifically when riding airships and stuff like that. We were recently talking about that.
Mm-hmm. And that's all the kinds of things that we're exploring in our character controller rework. So it is definitely something we know about and we want to change. That kind of stuff also affects your being able to draw spells while moving, and how that just doesn't work. And it could be said that that was a design decision, but I don't think anybody likes that right now as a design decision. So it's.
And I think it's important to note that the changes that are coming, that I've mentioned it a couple times here about fixing the combat thing. There is so much more to just. It's not just like, oh, go fix combat. This is a larger effort to address the root character controller itself, which combat and melee is a piece of. But the changes that are coming are more than just combat. It's about the character controller and the interaction model itself.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the character controller will come first, and it won't necessarily immediately fix other problems in other systems. And once that part is nailed down, then we can start chasing down the specific problems in other systems and solving them.
Going back to that question about social interaction and VR interaction, a lot of it has to do with making sure that the controller and the environment of controller with the world itself and the interaction it supports that in a way that is aligned to kind of the vision that we have. So,
yeah. Scallywag talks about opening and closing your hands as just a way to express yourself. That was something we've worked on it several times. I've actually made the gestures.
Yes, you have.
They're ready to be implemented. It's one of those things that's going to come in with the new player controller.
That
system.
is a
maybe not right away, but it is. So many things have been made.
The controller is fixed. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we want to fix this. We know it's an issue. It's a feature or something that we want to add, and it's like but the player controller. Let's fix that first, because we don't want to redo the work over and over and over.
It's a stack of dominoes. These things have to happen in a certain order so they mesh correctly. And it all starts with the character controller root itself, which touches combat, running, swimming, jumping, fighting, interaction, the ability to do hand poses again. So,
yeah,
I'm excited for it.
All right, so we are coming to the tail end of the Tavern Talk. So I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to mention, talk about, the next couple of minutes or so.
I just want to say thank you again. That like even for the bad feedback, like it's useful feedback. And again, without the community which has existed on this Discord, we wouldn't be doing anything. We'd be spinning our wheels. So thank you again for your support and your patience, and most of all for helping us do this and give us the feedback that we need to be actionable on iterating and making things better.
All right. Yeah, and feel free, anybody who's new here, just always welcome in the community, hang out, chat. I love when people are sharing, screenshots and little videos of their time in game. Hopefully we'll have a in-game event soon, do something fun, and like a play date thing with the community. I think would be really cool to do. And if you guys haven't already, leave us a review. That would be also super
Yeah.
helpful. We'd love to see it. And then just keep providing feedback. We have both the bug reports, so if you find anything funky, send those in, and then also feedback. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, because again, we're always reading those over, and yeah, we appreciate you guys so much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Keep verbosing your bugs. If you file a bug or you just want to give a piece of feedback, it will get read. Nothing goes into a round trash can. Every one of these bugs gets looked at.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close down the event, and just be on the lookout. We'll continue to do these. I don't have like a set date or anything. Just whenever we have team members that are available and they can jump in and have these talks. But yeah, keep an eye out for the announcements, and we'll see you in the Discord.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody that came today. Appreciate you all.
Thank you. Bye, guys.